All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Azul game review video. This is actually a friendly game that I played with rbhf, who is a viewer of the channel. And during the game, we were discussing move options and everything. So it's not your, I guess, traditional Azul game, but there was something interesting about this game from my perspective, which was that during the game, it kind of felt like things were not going my way. And yet, as you can see, I ended up winning by 19 points. So this is something that happens to me every now and then in both directions, which is that sometimes I feel like everything is going right and I still lose. And sometimes I feel like nothing is going right and I still win. And to me, that's kind of a sign that I still have a lot to learn about Azul. So in addition to just reviewing the plays from rbhf's side of the board, I'm also going to be talking about like how to evaluate the situation in each round, I guess. And by that, I mean like who's winning, which isn't always obvious, because I feel like I have work to do in that area. So let's jump in. We'll view this from my side, I guess, but doesn't really matter. So first of all, let's do the tile counts. And a pretty interesting draw. There's only one yellow, very heavy on pretty much every other color. So, you can kind of build column 2 or column 3 maybe. But in terms of, rbhf's play here, you pretty much can't go wrong with 3 blue. You don't want to pass that up for anything. Additionally, leaving 1 white in the center isn't very good for me. I don't have a huge incentive to just take 1 white here. So I don't remember exactly what I do here. I imagine I take 2 black on row 4. But let's find out. Okay, so interesting. So 2 things happened there. One, obviously, I initially played 2 black on row 4, and I initially took from this column, this factory. And the reason I ended up switching factories is because it grouped these 2 whites together, which would give my opponent a really easy play on row 4 white. And the second thing that happened is I switched from row 4 black to row 5 black. And I'm trying to remember the logic for that, to be honest. Given that there are so many reds, it would seem to make sense that working on the second column would make sense. But maybe my thought is that this kind of forces my opponent to take 2 reds here, because if they take 2 black from either factory, then I either get like 2 white with the first player tile or 4 red with the first player tile. So this is just like putting pressure on my opponent's black tiles. Okay, so rbhf pivots to the second column, which I think is a fine play here. There's only 3 white, so getting row 3 white next round isn't out of the question, especially with the first player tile, and you're basically guaranteed two black. So this makes sense to me, and it's a good use of the resources available. So let's see what I do. I would imagine that I either take two black on row 5 or take two red on row 2. And taking two red on row 2 might make a little more sense, just because I know I'm going to get one of these two blacks. So I don't know that I need to like take it now necessarily. Okay, so that's the play. And for rbhf here, I think you can just take two black on row 4, I believe. The thing that you have to be careful of when you make a play like two black on row 4 is whether or not you can still get your row 2. Now, in this situation, it's possible, right? Because if I take the two black, then it groups the two whites. So he'll get row 2 white. And if I don't take the two blacks, then the two blacks are there. So, yep, so two black on row 4. And for me, I think this is two black on row 5. And this kind of gets into like how to play different types of round ones. But one thing that I've given up on a little bit is playing too defensively in round 1 and just trying to set yourself up with the best situation. I don't know that necessarily applies here. But if you think about, like, my opponent has an advantage, which is row 3 blue. Like, they have completed row 3 blue. So how do I create an advantage of my own? In this case, it was the row 5 black. So this was the best opportunity for me to create an advantage of my own. Maybe that's the better way to put it. So sometimes, like, even if this doesn't look great for you, like, you just have to do your best to create an advantage, because your opponent has one over you. You need to build something over them. So, and I'm now thinking that maybe the reason that I started with row 5 black instead of row 4 black was to be able to have better access to my row 3. Basically, like, if my opponent had stuck with the middle column, and I guess either one, row 3 or 4, doesn't matter. But I know my opponent's going to want white next round, and I know that I was basically giving them the first player tile. So by building the center column, obviously they can still play row 2 blue, but white was going to be contested no matter what. But maybe I have a shot at row 3 blue next round as a less contested row 3. So maybe that was my logic there. Hopefully that explanation made some sense. Okay, so a somewhat interesting choice for rbhf, but there's really only two options. You can take the row 2 white, or you can take this 1 white. And taking the 1 white creates this group of 2 blue along with the group of 2 white. So, you're guaranteed a row 2. Obviously, you can't group the 3 white together because I'll just take them. So it's just a question of, like, do you care about trying to get row 2 blue, or are you okay with row 2 white? And I think in this situation, it's not wise to group the 2 blue together because it gives me a head start on my row 3. So just take 2 white here. And the rest of this should be pretty uneventful. This is a decision to whether or not to take these 2 blue. Again, I want them for row 3. I think it's correct to take them and play them on row 1 to get this adjacency. If you don't play them, then I'll take the white, or I'll take the yellow, and then you're left with the white, which is on the other side of the board. So I play the row 4 white, and rbhf throws out the yellow. So already you can maybe start to see why I'm not feeling particularly great about this game. Okay, so let's think about rbhf's options here. One thing when you're building on the side, even if you're not building the side column, if you end up with a situation like this, is obviously you want to be aware of that you only have one option for adjacency in each of your first 2 rows. So kind of immediately 2 blue stands out as a play. Additionally, you have plenty of options for black. You have 2 different groups of 2, and then there's these 2 singles. So there's no reason to rush into row 4 black. You have options for row 3 white, and the places that you're limited are in row 2 and row 1. So I think taking 2 blue here is the right play given how flexible the rest of the board is. Okay, so rbhf takes white, and I guess from the perspective of like what tiles do I most need, white is certainly up there. So I think that's fine. I'm trying to think of, like, I should have calculated how it would have played out taking the blues. If then I took 2 white, he takes 2 white, I take 1 white, he takes 1 white, that groups like all the blacks together. But that's not good for me either. So yeah, I'm not sure about the 2 white here, and it'll be interesting to see what I do. I imagine I just take the 2 blue to prevent this adjacency, and obviously, like, for my row 2 adjacency, I want yellow or black, but there's also opportunities to play either of those on row 3. So if I remember right, I think I pass up on row 2 adjacency to just take 2 blue. And the reason I don't play it on row 3 is, one, it prevents me from playing anything else on row 3, and it looks like there's going to be some overflow of tiles. And yeah, I guess that's it really. I was going to say that, I'm left with guaranteed to be left with an incomplete row. So I think I just take 2 blue and play it here. Actually, I remember the second point. The second point is that it's helpful to, like, get this out of the way. So let's say I play row 2 yellow this round. Then in the next round, I want blue in both row 2 and row 3. And so I'm competing with myself in the next round for blues. And given that there are so many blacks already, like, the likelihood that there's 2 blacks is probably fine. Like, there's probably going to be 2 blacks. But again, like, I might want black on row 1 next round. So by taking the blue now, I'm like relieving myself of having to compete with myself for the same color. So now next round I can focus all of the blue on row 3 instead of having to potentially play it on row 2 as well. Okay, and then for rbhf, I think you just take 1 white from the center here, secure the first player tile, gives you control over the blue in the next round that I'm going to want, and probably the white in the next round that I'm going to want. We saw that rbhf thought about these 2 whites, which does prevent me from filling out my row 4. Like, it guarantees that I can't do it, but it also gives me the opportunity to group some blacks together. And frankly, you can just take 1 white later in the round to prevent me from finishing my row 4. Yeah, so okay, so I think that was correct. And now for me, I think there's a couple of options here. So one option is to get kind of cute and just take 1 red and throw it away. And the reason that's a good option is obviously it prevents my opponent from grouping the 3 reds together and threatening completion of their row 5. The other reason is it's a good option is because I'm kind of flexible in the rest of this round. I can take a yellow or a black at some point to complete my row 1. I'll take 1 black at some point to complete my row 5. I'm probably not going to finish my row 4 anyway. So, excuse me. So taking 1 red here is a pretty viable play. The other idea would be to like take 2 black and play it on either row 1 or row 5, with the idea that if I take 2 black and my opponent takes 2 black, then it would group the whites together and I would finish my row 4 white. So it kind of prevents my opponent from being able to take the 2 black without a penalty. Some other things that I'm interested in doing are grouping the yellows up. So my opponent wants row 1 yellow and they need row 2 yellow or red, but really they want red to go on row 5 and they want blacks to go on row 4. So their ideal row 2 is actually yellow. So if I can get the 3 yellows grouped up, then that does damage to their upper rows, because ideally they would play yellow in both top rows. So I think it's possible that I go 2 black from the top factory here. It's also possible that I just take 1 black and let my opponent take 2 black, and then I'll take 2 black and group the whites together and force them to deal with it. So a couple of different options here. I did not discuss the option of taking 2 white. Yes, so obviously taking 2 white was an option because it groups the blacks together, and so it forces my opponent to, if they want to stop my whites, to create a group of 5 black, which is not good for them. And I guess this goes against what I said earlier, which is when rbhf was considering taking 2 whites, I said he could always just take a white later instead of taking 2 whites then. But we see now that how that has played out, where taking this white comes with some consequences. So I think in this case, you probably just let me have the white so that you can complete your row 4. And part of the reason is, if you look at the state of the boards, rbhf is going to have 2 row 3s completed, and I have 0 currently. So it's in his best interest to like play offensively, not defensively, because he's ahead in building. So I don't think I think it's fine to let me have this white. It's not even like, it's not scoring with adjacency, so it's only going to score 1 point. So I think taking the white is overly defensive. I think it's fine to just take 2 black here, or 3 black if you want to prevent me from playing row 3 black. Okay, so that's good. Now, for me, I think I just take the white. Let's see. If I take the white and he takes like 1 yellow for row 1, then I have to take 2 yellow on row 2. He takes 3 red either on row 2 or row 5, and then I get a row 3 black with the 4 black tiles. But I don't think I can really enter the next round with both of these, row 4 and row 5, still blocked. So I think the white is like almost forced here. And then, yeah, I kind of expect rbhf to take 1 yellow here. There's obviously other options, and this is maybe like dependent on what you value, but 1 yellow is gonna get him 3 reds either on row 2 or row 5. But let's think. It's in his best interest to group the blacks. I think that we can agree on, because it prevents me from getting like row 5 black and row 3 black, or row 5 black and row 1 black. So grouping the blacks is definitely a good idea. You could take 2 red, or you could take 1 black. 1 black is interesting. It's kind of the same. I mean, it's the same as 1 yellow almost. It's just non-adjacent. So I think 1 yellow is the best here. And we see a lot of thinking. Okay, so lands on 2 yellow, which gives me an interesting opportunity. So if I just take 1 yellow, then I force him to either overpay for row 1 or to pick row 5 red and forego a row 1. So I think this 2 yellow move, you know, unless you're really comfortable with the idea of giving up the row 1 and completing the row 5 or overpaying for the row 1, this, you know, maybe backfired a bit. Because not only am I going to get row 1, but I'm guaranteed to get a row 3 if I want. So I'm sure I take 1 yellow here. And I think this is the correct play, to play on row 1 instead of row 5. There are still 12 reds, and I have already spent my upper row reds. So I'm not going to be defending red in any way that's helpful to my board. Like, I need row 4. I'm sorry, I need row 3 blue. I'm not going to want to play row 3 red. And I could play on row 4 red, but, you know, it's not adjacent to anything. It's going to score me 1 point, so it's kind of just a desperation. Okay, so getting to my play, This one's kind of interesting, actually, and I think a situation that is where the decision does depend on how the game is going. And right now, I'm losing in building. And this black, if I complete it right now, is only worth 2 points. So playing on row 3 actually gives me an opportunity to kind of like catch up in building in the future. My row 2 white will be worth more. If I play row 3 white, it will be worth more. So I think this is a situation where it's best to hold off on completing row 5 and instead to just play on row 3. Okay, so another interesting round, there are 0 white tiles. And from rbhf's perspective, things look good. There's a lot of red to play on row 5. You can prevent me from getting 3 blue by just taking these 3 blue right off the bat. And either playing them on row 2 or on row 4. And all these yellows are fine for you. You can play them on row 3. You can play them on row 4. Excuse me. So, this is part of why I was saying that this game did not feel good from my perspective. I am up by 3 points right now, but from a building perspective, it's not looking great. So rbhf is going to play 3 blue on row 2 here, which I think is correct. It frees up your reds for row 5. So even if I try to defend them, like, you can still concentrate them on row 5. And this just shuts down my row 3 blue. So I'm looking at this board and I'm not worried about getting a black here, but like, it's really not ideal because ideally I would have the rest of this column finished before I play it. I'm looking at defending reds and, playing row 5 red or row 4 red doesn't feel great. My row 2 options are even kind of sketchy. Like, I can either take these 3 yellows, or I need to get row 2 black, which puts, takes some blacks off the board and threatens my row 5, even though I just said I don't want to necessarily complete it this round. So, to me, what made the most sense was I'm not going to get row 3 blue. I'm not going to get row 3 white. I'm probably not going to get row 3 red. And my opponent can play these 3 yellows on row 3. So, like, it's not ideal building, but let's just take these row 3 yellow. So in this game, I'm having to like build not in my column, which I think is why it felt so off. Okay, so if you're rbhf here, I think there's 2 options. There's take 1 yellow from the center for your row 1. And this is good because you want to control blue next round. I still don't have my row 3 blue, and in theory, you'll be able to play blue on row 4. So you have a good opportunity to take some blue. Or you can play the 2 red. But playing the 2 red gives me like 2 black on row 2. And the first player tile to control blue next round. So I think it's worth just taking the 1 yellow and being able to control the blue tiles in the next round. Okay, so for me, the fact that rbhf took this one yellow puts my row 2 at risk. Like getting row 2 yellow is now somewhat unlikely. So getting row 2 black is ideal. However, it obviously gives my opponent their row 5 red. So it's not a easy play to make. But if I remember right, I was basically resigned to the fact that I have no other option and I just need to build in the best way that I can. And right now that's row 2 black. If I take like 2 red on row 4, that most likely just puts me in a situation where next round I have an incomplete row 4. I probably left row 2 empty. So I think you just have to like sacrifice here and take the 2 black. Apparently I go back and forth on this and ultimately just land on like this is the best I can do. So rbhf of course just takes these, and the rest of this round is more interesting from rbhf's side than mine. I should just complete my row 5 black and then get either blue or black on row 1. So this is not interesting from my standpoint, but sort of interesting from rbhf's standpoint, because in reality he doesn't want to play any tiles, but he also doesn't want to take any negatives. Like if you can get 2 yellow here, that's pretty good, but you kind of would rather just have these 2 rows open. So I assume he's going to take 1 black, which forces me to take 2 blue, and then he gets the 2 yellow on row 3. And we'll see this play out. And from my perspective, I think at this point I'm saying, well, I might as well just play these reds. I am behind in building and I have nothing to lose. They're in theory going to be worth 4 points at some point. Given the number of yellows yet left, I could actually even threaten a second column. So playing these reds makes a lot of sense for me. And as we kind of talk about the evaluation of who's winning, I am going to be well behind. I did manage to make my opponent take -4 to my -1. So actually it's a tie game. But if you look at our boards, like my board looks terrible relative to rbhf's nice compact board. However, there's one thing I have neglected to talk about now that I look at the tile counts, which is that there's only 4 black left. And that's before this round. So we have 3. So at this point, there's only 3 black left. And if I were playing from rbhf's standpoint, and you basically heard me talk about all the plays I think were correct, at no point did I say, oh, you should take some black here because we're running out. And maybe that's just oversight, but I think like the way rbhf has been building feels so natural that it didn't really, like, taking black just didn't really come to mind. And in reality, the time to do it would have been last round. But that would have meant potentially passing up on the 3 blues and letting me get 3 blue. So maybe it's just a situation of like some unlucky tile combinations. But we'll see that the black does play a factor in this game. The other thing to notice is that despite having this janky looking board, I'm tied in points. And so, there's something to be said that, like, obviously adjacency is important. My opponent has built with adjacency, whereas I have not. But if you can force your opponent to take negatives, then adjacency becomes less important. I think building with adjacency, like with perfect adjacency versus with mixed or medium adjacency, is maybe worth 5 to 10 points over the course of the game, and you can make that up in negatives. So I guess maybe that's part of the conclusion I'm drawing. Like, although my board looks bad, I've taken fewer negatives in the past 2 rounds. And so even though I haven't been building with perfect adjacency, like, I'm in decent shape. Okay, so rbhf to play here. There is one black tile. Both of us want it on row 1, and it's kind of critical importance to him, at least, because it's his only chance of completing both of these is to get this one now. I suppose that's not true, but it's highly unlikely to be able to play all 3 in the next round when I know he needs all 3. So I think taking 1 black here is fine. The alternative would basically be to take blues, right? So I need 3 blue. There's only 3 in the next round, so this is the round for me to do it. So I think the question is here, do you give up this 1 black to prevent me from getting blues? And I think the answer is probably yes. Because not only am I going to get 2 blue, I'm going to get the first player tile for the 5th round. And as unlikely as it is, there is still a chance you could get both blacks next round. And at the very least, you're like borderline, you're basically guaranteed to get row 1 black. So maybe it's fine to give up the black. So rbhf does play this black here, and I agreed that I think that was right. But maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was better to take the blues. The thing about taking the blues is I don't know that I can even take the black. Like, if he takes 2 blue and I take black, he takes the other 2 blue, and I'm hosed next round. So I think you could take the blues and I still have to take blue, and then you can take black at the end of the sequence, right? So rbhf takes blues, I take blue. He takes the last blue. Oh no, so I get the black at the end of the sequence. Okay, so he would have to give up the black, and then he gets the white. It would be worth calculating it all out, but you could still get the black. You'd basically get to choose between having the black or me getting the blue. So if you take 2 blue and then I take 2 blue, now you have the choice. You can take the black or you can let me get the blue. Hmm. I think it's a pretty like ambiguous situation, but I think taking the blues away may have been more critical, um, because I'm not going to complete them next round, barring me getting the first player tile and there being a group of three blues. So I think taking the blues may have been more important here. Okay, so I of course take the blues. Um, I think if you're rbhf, you maybe just take one red here to secure your row 2 red. You don't want to let them get grouped up into a larger group. Okay. So 2 white. There are 8 white left. So this gives you a shot at threatening. I think you can even threaten complete color. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, so you can threaten complete color next round, as unlikely as it is. But I think this play needlessly complicates the current round, because now there's like, I don't need to rush to take either of these 2 blues. Either one is fine for me. But now I can take 2 red, and suddenly rbhf's row 2 is a little bit murkier. Additionally, this white, like, I think the goal of this play was to try to force me to take the white maybe. But the reality is that this white tile is not worth very much to me. It's worth 2 points this round. And it makes my play on black next round worth 3 more points. So 1 more for adjacency and 2 more for the row bonus. So this white tile is worth 5 points for me in total, which actually is pretty good, I guess. But I'm certainly not going to like rush to it. I think there's higher priority things this round. So yeah, I have a couple options here. I can take 1 blue and group the reds together to make him pay more for row 2 red. And additionally, after that, I'll have opportunities to group yellows to make him pay for row 3 yellow. There's also the possibility of taking these 2 yellows for my row 2, which I need, which keeps the blues separated. So I leave myself with the option there. And again, I'm grouping reds that make his row 2 more expensive. And his row 2 is much more important than my row 4. So although I have a threat of a second column, we don't want to like, that's not the main goal right now. The main goal is build row 2 and row 3. And we can, make this materialize if it happens. So I'm going to guess that I took the 2 yellow from this factory. Okay, and now, so now 3 red is basically forced. And here, again, I can just take 1 white because the blues are still separated. And so I can secure my row 1 and still leave myself open for blues. I think that seems like the best play here. And for rbhf, you're basically just taking a yellow. I think taking the yellow from the center is best. Taking from the factory lets me control the end of the round scenario. So I take a blue, of course, and now he gets to control the end of the round scenario. And again, like we talked about this in round 3, I think, at the end of the last round. He doesn't want to play any of these tiles. So he doesn't want to play anything on row 5. It's just going to clog up his row 5. So kind of a weird situation. I mean, I think the play is clearly you take 1 red, then I take 1 red, and then you take 2 blue, and I get left with 3 yellow. But it's actually a little more interesting than that, because do you want to leave me with 3 yellow? In fact, I think I thought about taking 3 yellow before deciding on the red. So you probably don't want to give me the 3 yellow, because it opens up this column threat. So you have to take them. The question is, do you play them or not? It's -6 to play them. Whereas if I choose to play the blues, I'm only going -1. So let's try to figure out what's right here. And when you're in a situation like this and you're trying to figure out, like, should I play these tiles or not? Oftentimes you can just plan your round 5 ahead of time. So, and the thing that you're afraid of, right, when you play tiles like this, the thing you're afraid of is that you're going to get blocked and have to take negatives. So the thing you want to look for is, like, how can I possibly take negatives? So there's 3 blue, and if you play yellow, yes, you could end up with those 3 blue. It's not a huge threat. If you play, there's 4 yellow. If you play 3 yellow, you're going to have 2 yellow over potentially. So that's somewhat of a threat. There's only 2 red. You don't have to worry about that. There's only 3 black. You're trying to play them on row 2. So the main threat is, if you play yellow, you have 3 spots for white tiles, and then there's 5 left that could get dumped on you. So that is a threat. But if you look at my board, I'm going to play 2 of those white tiles. So now there's only 3 left that can get dumped on you. And I might be interested in playing white in row 3 because I'm not going to be playing red in row 3, which is the other option. So you could probably logic that you're unlikely to get a significant number of whites dumped on you. So I think it's pretty safe to play the yellows. The biggest threat is that you get these 3 blues. And obviously, like, you could end up with more negatives along the way, but there's no, like, massive threat because you can play these 8 white and because I need some of those white. So I think taking and playing 3 yellows is correct. And for me, it's kind of the same calculation, right? And so I calculate, okay, if I play these blues, can these 3 blues hurt me? No, I just play them on row 5. Can the reds hurt me? No, I have row 3 open and row 4 open. Can the yellows hurt me? No, there's only 2 of them. Can the black hurt me? No, I want 1. And can the white hurt me? No, I can play them on row 2 and row 3. So when you're making a decision like this, it's a good idea to look at where every color can go in round 5 and determine if you're actually in danger. And I think for both of us, we determined we're not in danger. We can play these tiles instead of taking the negatives in this round. Okay, so we've reached round 5. It's a tie game. And because I have the first player tile, I have an advantage that more or less wins me the game, right? My opponent needs 2 black, and I can take that away with my row 1 black. So that is, of course, my first move. And from here, there's not a lot that rbhf can do because, you can simply, like, count how many rows you can score on. I've talked about this in other videos. It's like a rule of thumb in round 5 situations, but rbhf can score on row 1 and row 4. And he can score on row 5, but when I say, like, how many rows can you score on, I mean rows that are going to score you, like, 5 or more points. So this, like, getting 2 points here isn't doing that much. So when you're doing this just, like, rough math, obviously if you're doing, like, deep calculations, you need to account for this, but when you're starting round 5 and you're saying, okay, how do I win this game? You can very quickly just say, like, how many rows can I score on? How many rows can my opponent score on? And so he can score on 2 rows, while I can score on 2 rows, and row 3. Obviously, you have to do the tile math to make sure that that's physically possible, but he gets 1 white, I get 2 white, he gets 2 white, I get 3 white, right? So we've done it. I can score on my top 3 rows. He can only score on 2 rows. And that basically means there's no way for him to catch me unless he can dump big negatives on me. But as we've already discussed, there's no way to really do that. There's yellows. So actually that's the way for him to win, probably, is to try to dump these 4 yellows on me, because that's what I can't play. So I missed that in the last round, actually. So for him, you take 1 white here. Okay, so takes the 3 white to prevent me from getting my row 3 white. That's good, actually. I missed that. Talking too quickly. But I can make an interesting play that forces him to overpay for row 1 white, which is I can play 1 white on row 3. Then he has to take 2 white. He doesn't have to take them right away, but he'll have to take 2 white for row 1. So I don't do that, and the reason is because playing from the factory allowed me to control the end of the round. So if I had taken 1 white, I think it was in the center, then he could potentially control the end. He would be able to control the end of the round and force these yellows on me. But now I can guarantee that I don't get those yellows, which we just discussed was basically his only path to winning. So I just take 1 red here. He's going to have to deal with the yellows, and there's nothing at this point. And yeah, I decide to take that black instead of playing those blues. He takes it. It's all doesn't matter much at this point. And yeah, so he ends up minus 11, because taking the 3 whites gave him an extra, and then taking the first player tile with the additional white. So that's how the lead grew to be 19 points. But yeah, just an interesting game where, like, it really did not feel good to me. Even though the scores were generally close in each round, it just felt like I'm not building as well as my opponent. I have all of these holes in my board. I haven't been building with adjacency. But I think, kind of the lesson is that you can, one, make up for some of that in the end. Like, even I was tied at 15-15, but I had these big plays left of, like, I had row 2 yellow left when it was scoring, maybe 6 points. And then row 3 blue, when I played it, I think scored 7, which is better than, like, you get 4 for an upper row adjacency, or 6 for a row 2 adjacency. So and then, of course, the other topic was the depletion of black tiles, and that my opponent was unable to finish row 2, which was a big gap. So it's interesting from both sides of the board. I think for rbhf, there maybe needed to be a moment when you realize there's only 4 blacks left, so I'm not going to play this adjacent row 2 blue, and instead I'm just going to ensure that I can finish the black tiles because there's plenty of blues left. I don't have to worry about that. So pretty interesting game. And hopefully some of you have had this experience of feeling like either you did everything right and still lost, or nothing felt right and you still won. And this helped to maybe explore why that happens. I think it's still like the thing that I'm worried about is that I'm going to go into my next games and say, I don't need to play with adjacency. Like, I just did this game review where I won a game by 19 points with my garbage adjacency. But I think the reality is that you have to be very careful with that. You can't just like play uber defensively and build with terrible adjacency. You have to be still playing in a smart way where you're not taking very many negatives and maybe forcing some on your opponent such that you make up for your lack of adjacency, which I think is more or less what happened here. I was able to force enough negatives, or the tile draws were such that my opponent had to take negatives to complete what they wanted. And so even though I wasn't building with perfect adjacency, I was able to keep up and ultimately come out on top in the end. The other thing this shows you is just the power of the first player token in round 5. If rbhf had the first player token in round 5, then they probably win, because they do finish, row 2 and row 1. Though who knows, maybe I am able to get row 3 white in that case. I don't know. It would have been a completely different forcing line. But anyway, hope this was a good review. And I will see you next time.